Okay, good afternoon and welcome. This is an independent tutorial to support psychology at work, and today I'm going to be providing some guidance for writing your article. So your first assessment for this module, you have to write an article. It's an academic piece of work written in the style of an article for the psychologist, and it has a 1,500 word maximum. The due date is on the 15th of March 2018. So to prepare for this assignment, you'll be asked to choose your focus based on the lectures from the first half of the module. It's running in weeks 2 till 6. There's a lot of information prepared for you on Blackboard, including the assessment topics and also the criteria and marking guidelines and so forth. And we also have a special lecture in week 20 dedicated to providing guidance for this assessment. So for this tutorial, what I'm trying to help is to get you to look at some relevant examples of articles, and the BPS do publish different sorts of written pieces. So they have some editorials and reviews and articles of different descriptions. So the two I've picked out for you to look at are good prototypes. And what we can do in this tutorial is see what skills you already have and which ones can be transferred to the assessment. And also it's a new form of assessment for you, so we can see what skills you need to develop for success on the module. Knowing how to change hats between different sorts of written communication is an important skill for both the academic and business worlds. I think one of the great things about your degree is that you get the chance for so many different types of written communication. So you've done research skills reports using your standard format for empirical work. You've completed essays, you've done a developmental critique, but you've also had opportunities with other modules that you may have done. Some of you have done reflections or proposals or case formulations, and I think it's just fantastic. I've written here written communication, but this changing between different requirements is also for oral communication. So you'll get a chance to do a poster and present that to an audience, for example. So the British Psychological Society, they publish The Psychologist. It comes out every month. It was relaunched in January last year, and it aimed to reflect and encourage the trend for clear science communication, and they actually included a special feature on writing for impact. When they say writing for impact, what they identify is a challenge to the view that we must appear as objective, dispassionate and technical as possible. And it's probably worth you sort of reflecting on that, but because of course in many of your reports and essays we're telling you to be objective, dispassionate and technical. You write without using the first person, and you say things like it was hypothesized, like that's come from the science and not from you. So before continuing, just to check that you've read the two articles that you will need to in order to understand this tutorial. So I recommend that you have a read of the articles by Limani and Leman. That's just been recently published in The Psychologist. It's an article on sexism that we'll have a look at. And there's also a slightly older article by Dunning, The Paradox of Knowing, and that was published in 2013 in The Psychologist. Both of these are on Blackboard. So your task for this tutorial is to identify ways in which they are similar and which they are different. The comparison is with a student essay. So we're going to compare articles and essays in terms of their style and content. You might want to draw up a little diagram chart like this. So you can write over here how the essays are similar to articles and how you think articles might differ from a standard essay. We're going to start by looking at the article by Bromnick and Lehmann. Great names, by the way. And it's possible to view this article in 4 different ways. You can read it in hard copy. So the BPS publish the magazine in printed form. If you're a member, it comes through your door. It's posted to you. You can read it online at the BPS website. Some of the content online is protected to members only, but some you can access in general if you're not a member. You can download the PDF version, which is what I've done to supply the materials for you to look at today. And they also have an app if you want to have a look at the psychologist in that form. I'm going to just go now to the article by Bromnick and Lehmann. This is the online version of The Psychologist. You can see across the top here they do provide these different types of written contributions, and this way of viewing the article is similar to how it is in print. So I'm going to go through looking at this article, picking out, in my opinion, some of the ways in which it's similar, but mostly about some of the differences between this article and the sorts of essays that you're used to writing as part of your academic studies. So let's get started. Well, first of all, we notice the article starts with an illustration, and you wouldn't typically see that in an essay, not at least at university level. A female Doctor Who. You can, if you wish, in your own article for this module, include illustrations or diagrams or charts or figures. It can help make your article accessible to a wider readership, which is what we're aiming for. And we move on now to have a look at some of the text. So it starts, egalitarian norms are typically endorsed in most Western democracies, and it could be argued that expressions of sexist beliefs and attitudes have been driven underground. So although we start with this sort of quite friendly, jokey illustration, you can see by the author's choice of language that it is an academic piece of work here. One of the first things I want to draw your attention to is here, where it uses a question. It can be quite a good style for articles to use rhetorical questions, or to ask questions and then go on to answer them. I like that style in articles more than I like it in essays. You notice here they use the word we. We always tell you don't use we or I or me in your essays. You do see it more and more, however, in published papers. But we say don't do it. You can do this for your article. Okay, moving on to this paragraph now. You can see them here referring to some published work. So they say, according to Peter Glick and Susan Fiske, so this would be a style of referencing where if this was an essay, your tutor would say, no, use APA, because it comes from a 96 paper there. So if this was an essay, it would say Glick and Fiske, bracket, 1996. But they do give the reference there, and they've given a quote, and that is in APA style. And when we get to look at the references, that reference by Glick and Fiske is in the reference list. But to make this point, for your article, you can refer to authors in this way if you think it's going to be helpful to the reader to see it in a more informal or friendly style perhaps. But you can see here they're referring to this paper and to empirical work. So moving down, again we've got a slightly more informal citation there. Lemonaki et al. 2015, that's APA style. Lemonaki citing herself, that you do see with readers. Okay, we've got another question here starting this paragraph. So she's asking the reader questions and then she's going on to answer them. In this paragraph here, you can see she's referring to Carly Wayne and the Washington Post, which is a newspaper, and she's talking here about recordings of Donald Trump. And I point that out to you because for your article on this module, it can be quite a good style. It can really help the reader if you do find a contemporary issue or something that's come from the press or public thinking to sort of hang your academic work on. It can make it interesting for the reader because the reader might have thought about Carly Wayne or Donald Trump or some of those things, and it can help combine what might be in the reader's mind to an academic appraisal. We're moving on here. She's talking about the UK situation where we have a woman Prime Minister and First Minister of Scotland. And you can see here there are some references, and again some of them are more informal, but it's still drawing on scholarly material. The authors here use, you can see here and here, down here, there's subheadings. So this distinguishes an article from an essay because you wouldn't normally see subheadings within an essay. Although when you go on to write longer pieces of work like your third year dissertation, it is normal to see some subheadings. But in articles, they can work particularly well to chunk your points that you're making within these subheaded sections. Got an interesting reference here, another question and a reference. This is to a book, and again, oops, there. You wouldn't see this book referred to in that way within an essay. It is a scholarly sociological text, I think, and she's referring to it there in a direct way. Again, if this was an essay, you would say Jackman, bracket, 1994, and not give the title in the article itself, in the essay. So we've got some more scholarly content here. So it's well referenced, although we have seen a more relaxed style of referring to authors. The article does draw on empirical work. She's talking here about some of the reports that have been written. So again, if you are writing about a topic which interests people outside of academic circles, you can bring in those kind of documents. And she concludes here. So I haven't read through the whole article to you, but one of the things you'll notice is that it starts with a sort of, I'm just scrolling to the top now, it starts with a sort of quite a popular title here. You would never have an essay with that title. your essay would be critically evaluate or compare and contrast or such like. But if you look at what she's done or what they've done in the article, they have been critical and they have been comparing and contrasting. But they start with a nice popular title, they start with an illustration, they introduce the topic, they provide literature, which is their sort of evidence, and they reach a concluding point. And then you'll see the references. I just want to have a little look at the references with you. So you'll see, first out, it is in a style that you're familiar with. They cite Allport, which is a very classic reference when looking at prejudice, but most of the references are recent or fairly recent, and I will encourage you to use recent references, especially if you're writing about a topic like gender, because it's a vast area of research and fastly moving, so you want to have some of the most recent references that you can find. This is a really important point. Find recent references, but obviously that doesn't mean you can't cite classic references as well. You can view it as a PDF. There's quite a lot of references here. For your article for this assignment, we've recommended that you have 20 as a maximum. But if you look here, they are European Journal of Social Psychology, Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, Journal of Social Issues. They are coming largely from peer-reviewed journals, which we always say is the gold standard for credible sources. Where she has referred to popular topics, she has used some web links here, but don't over rely on these. DOI, etc. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my slides. The second article that I recommended that you read was by David Dunning, and this appeared in The Psychologist in June 2013. So you can see the full article on Blackboard, and of course there are other articles as well. These are just two examples. You can find them through databases and in print copy. I've made some annotations here. I'm going to just show you how it looks on the PDF version. So again, we've got quite a catchy title. What Dunning does with this article is he starts off, it's almost like an abstract, where he highlights some questions that he wants to ask in the article, ask and answer. So this box here, he's included. You can do that style should you wish. You'll notice, by the way, that the formatting is different to an essay. We would expect just a standard block of text from a Word document, and we're going to leave this one up to you. So it is perfectly acceptable to just submit a standard Word article with normal layout, because actually for magazines you often do send them in that way, magazines and journals, and they'll format them. But if you find it fun, or if you want to have a go, you're more than welcome to do that. So let's have a look at how this article starts. I'm going to look for some additional points perhaps to the one I made about the sexism article. So you'll see here at the start of the article, David Dunning includes a quote To know others is wisdom. To know oneself is enlightenment, from a Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu. And you wouldn't normally see this for an essay. I would actually say you'd never see this for an essay, but some of you may be used to this style if you've studied the humanities prior to psychology. So if you've written essays for English literature or history, maybe even politics and so forth. So if you want to find a quote to hang your article on, you can do that. So we see here again references to the literature, references to his own work. And we can see as well subheadings are used. So we are picking up on some of the same points. You can also see, in terms of similarities with essays, that it's written in, a high level of academic writing. They just fail to display the same sagacity. Oh, six big words. Got an illustration there. This is the layout that you read from the magazine. And there's a couple of points here that I'll draw your attention to. Look at the way he starts some of the paragraphs. But here is the key twist. And over here. But wait, a careful reader might say. So he is starting some of these paragraphs with a popular way of engaging the reader. He's trying to keep the reader interested throughout the article. Oh, stats down here. And we've got stats and references to different parts of the literature. Here he's got a nice example. The smell of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies does break people's willpower. No reference. So he's trying to explain a point in the previous paragraph, and he's illustrating it here for the reader so they'll understand what he's referring to. Makes it real. References. So you can see it is a scholarly piece here, using these references as evidence for his arguments. He's got subheadings, and here you can see, as you would for an essay, he's got quite a strong and powerful conclusion, although for an essay you wouldn't necessarily see that subheading. He refers back to the Chinese proverb at the end. So that is a literary style, as I mentioned, that you will have seen perhaps in other disciplines. And if you have a quote that you find that you'd like to use for your own article, then you can use that. So okay, I'm going to go back to my slides. I made some annotations on that Dunning article, so you can see that in print form if you prefer. These are the points I made as I read it through. So I filled in that chart that I recommended that you fill in, comparing essays and articles. And I'm going to talk now, or sort of conclude, by drawing together some of those points about similarities and differences. So essays and articles are similar in that they demonstrate knowledge, understanding, and a critique of the literature. Essays, in my opinion, are designed to inform and persuade, and your article is no different on that count. You might not have thought of your essays as being about persuasion, but that's what you're doing. In fact, when you write your research skills reports, you're persuading the reader. You're informing them of what you've done, and you're using your data to persuade them. The same as essays and the same as articles. And I put here about taking action, because you might want the reader to take some action. Maybe you want them to do some additional research, or maybe you want them to think about a concept in a particular way that you've outlined. You might want to stop them from doing something in the future. And essays and articles of the type that we're talking about are written for a professional audience. They're similar in that they use references to substantiate argument. These are both within the text and include a list at the end. And you'll see that they're similar in that they do or should have contemporary but also classic references, but you'll see that they don't have old or poor source references. What we did see when we looked at those articles was a slightly more informal citation of authors in the text. So they said, Susan Fiske, and you wouldn't normally see that in an essay. In fact, you'd be marked down for it, but you can use that style for your article. For your article, we recommend a reference limit up to 20. When we looked at the articles as well, we could see that essays and articles are fairly similar in structure. So you have a title, an introduction, a middle bit, which contains the main body of your argument or your thesis, and then a conclusion. We can also see that they were similar in that they had formal academic language. So you don't see things like isn't, wasn't, or slang, colloquial terms. These are showing some of the differences. So we saw that articles typically use subheadings to chunk material together and to hook the reader in. We saw rhetorical questions, which I mentioned I don't like in essays, but they can work really well in articles. These were not all rhetorical questions. Some of them were just overt questions because the author then went on to answer them. We saw catchy title, recommend you have that. An engaging style. We've seen an example where there's quotes from outside of psychology, and also within articles, it's okay to use the first person. So you can say I, we, my, etc. So you might have spotted something that I haven't mentioned. If you have and you want some clarification, then please post on the discussion board and I can answer it there. Is there anything you're not sure about? This is a new type of assessment for you, at least at university level, but you have lots of relevant skills to demonstrate within your article. So all those literature search skills, or your critical analysis, or your ability to structure written communication can be brought to this assignment. Your main challenge is to be scholarly yet accessible for a wider audience. Your challenge is to get the balance between those two, so you're neither too essay-like nor too popular like you would find in a woman's magazine or something. There's a full marking scheme on Blackboard, and as I mentioned at the start, we will have a dedicated lecture to help support your work on the article. So I hope you found this useful. This is Rachel Bromnick speaking. You can email me. I haven't actually ever done one of these sorts of recordings before, so if you think it's a good idea, then I'd be happy to hear from that as well. And if you've got any queries about what the assessment is requiring, please get in touch. Good luck, everybody!